just yelling at me, like, what are you going to do for me? And in that moment, I realized he needed me to give him my addiction. Like, I needed to give him my life. Like, my way isn't working. And so a lot of rookie Christians, or cowardly Christians, as I used to call myself, like, we're always asking, God, help me. Like, I need help, help me, help me. But it's like, what are we going to do for him? What are we going to sacrifice for him? And so he was just telling me, like, dude, give me your addiction.
Branden, welcome to the happy hour.
Thank you so much. This isn't the happy hour that I grew up attending, but I'm grateful that this is what I'm doing today.
It's better though, right?
Way better.
Way better. Way better.
I don't have to worry about getting handcuffs put on my wrists.
I'm so happy. I would not invite you to a happy hour like that, Branden, knowing that. Here's the thing. Everyone always asks me, like, why did you name your show The Happy Hour? And, if I, like, want to be really, really spiritual, I'm like, well, because we just talk about happy things, which isn't always true. But really, Branden, here's how I named it. Because I was like, my girlfriends and I, if we were to meet for happy hour, what kind of conversations would we have? Or what kind of questions would we ask? Or what kind of stories would we tell? And so that's what I wanted the show to feel like. So this is not your old happy hour, Branden. It's your new happy hour.
I love it.
I love it so much. Thanks for being here. I want you to introduce yourself to my listeners.
Yeah, my name's Branden Terrell. Jamie, thank you for having me on with you today. 35 years old, happily married to amazing wife, Lacey. We have 4 awesome kids and 3 wild dogs.
3 wild dogs. And you live in California?
Yeah, we live up in Northern California. I love the beauty of Northern California, but I kind of like the values and the people down in Texas.
Come on. All the Californians people are coming, so we welcome you as well. You are welcome to come here. I want to set the stage for how I was introduced to you. So my friend Tiffany Daniels, who's a mutual friend of ours, she runs Therefore. She's been on the podcast before, and last fall I was with her out at Bob Goff's place, The Oaks, which is in Southern California. And I've been there a couple times, and you and I are both friends with Bob as well. And while I was there, Tiffany said that she had, I don't know if she had been or she was going into the prison, San Quentin, which is north of San Francisco. North of San Francisco? North of San Francisco.
Just north of San Francisco, 5
just
minutes.
North. Yeah. So she had been there with Bob. And I was like, oh my gosh. Like before the pandemic, I used to do jail ministry here in Austin. I'm like, man, Tiffany, I would love to go. Like, I would be something I really would love to go. I'd love to see the work that's happening there. And so she put in a good word for me, and somehow I got invited. And so February of this year, I flew to San Francisco and stepped into my very first prison, San Quentin. And I met you right before we walked in. Okay. So I met a lot of people. There were like maybe 15 people with us, and I meet Branden. And then somehow I found out that you were not just on this tour with us, but you were formerly incarcerated at San Quentin. So I was like, okay, well, that's interesting, right? So I would love to talk to him. And then this is the craziest thing to me, Branden. I was like, so Branden, how long have you been out? And at this point you were like 4 months. I was like, 4 months? Is this traumatic for you to walk back into this place? And so that is how we met. And by the end of the tour, I looked at Branden and I said, hey, I'd love to have you on my show, The Happy Hour. And you said to me, I'll never forget it. You said, you really need to talk to my wife, Lacey. She's the one you need to talk to. And so I said, done. And so Lacey's coming on Friday, you guys. So I talked to Lacey as well. But that's how we met. And so I'm so excited to have you here. And I just want to set the stage real quick. People that listen to The Happy Hour know that I have a heart for caring for all of God's people. And I think all of God's people matter. So I have a very holistic pro-life view. So I would be pro-life from conception all the way to natural death. And some of the things that fall under my pro-life, like mentality and worldview, would be how we care for people who are incarcerated in our country. And so it's something that I have been a champion for, had conversations about. And so I really want to talk to you about that today. But first, I want you to set the stage for us as much as you're willing to share of what took you to San Quentin.
Yeah, no, I think it's about to get real, right? But like, I'm going to be as authentic as I can be. God created me to just be real. It was a pleasure meeting you and Tiffany. Like, y'all are amazing people. Bob, I remember when Bob first came into San Quentin, just on a tour, like San Quentin's the only prison I think that actually like has people come in to visit and talk to the incarcerated. Me and him walked around that prison that day and like just was like, you know what, like what you're doing with Love Does, let's get that going on here. And so now that I'm out, anytime he goes in, he's like, Branden, come on. And so it's a treat like having the conversation as we did. And then, oh yeah, by the way, like I just got out of prison myself. Like this was my house for a decade. Um, but yeah, like what got me to San Quentin? Um, I'm someone who growing up, like my identity was athlete. Like I wanted to be a professional baseball player or football player. I was amazing at both of them. Um, and like the only place I really felt uh, valued and felt special was when I was playing sports, right? And my junior year in high school, just lots of trouble. I was always getting into lots of trouble. And I was ultimately expelled. And so I remember walking out of the principal's office and making a decision, a choice, even though I wasn't mature, like I still made a decision. Like if I can't go to school, that means I cannot play sports. And if I do not have sports in my life, I'm not going to be coming to school. Right. And
Mhm.
so at that point, my life ultimately started heading to San Quentin. Once again, I didn't know who I was outside of the ball field. And I immediately started hanging out with all the wrong people in all the wrong places, trying to fill this void. And I had no relationship with Jesus. I think it's safe to say that like my family believed in God, but they weren't practicing. We didn't go to church much. Actually, I did go to a Christian school in seventh grade, and um, lots of trouble, mischief. I like to say mischief because I see kids today, and I'm like, that's not that big of a deal. Like we just gotta love on them. But that was me, just lots of it, times like 100. And so administration and the folks would get frustrated and do things with me. But and at that Christian school in seventh grade, the principal, who was also the pastor, was locking me in the nursery and abusing me, like physically abusing me. And this is someone who played NFL football, big guy. And I took that for 2 weeks. And I remember my mom dropped me off, and I already had my mind made up, like I'm gonna act like I'm going to school, and then she's gonna leave, and I'm gonna walk out. And so when I walked out, the school was in the sanctuary doing their morning prayer and rituals. I just remember, like, if this is God and this is what like Christianity is, I don't want nothing with it, nothing to do with it. And so fast forward to getting kicked out of high school and really just like aimlessly going through life. Um, like I didn't have this relationship with God. I didn't hate him. It just
Mhm.
was a thing that happened, right? Um, and So, I'm living a lifestyle. I started feeling the void, addicted to alcohol, really addicted to anything that made me feel good, whether it was
Mhm.
alcohol or drugs, adrenaline junkie, doing just stupid things that like living. Bob always says, like, live on the edge of yikes, right? Like that was me, but in all the wrong ways.
Right.
And, um, ultimately, I knew I had a problem, but I just didn't know how to ask for help. I was afraid to ask for help. I didn't want to show that weakness. And as men, uh, in this country, our culture, like we're not supposed to expose weakness. It was
Mhm.
always instilled to me, like, don't ask for help. Like we deal with things on our own. Actually, like on the football field, like I was praised, like to
Mm.
express violence and anger. And so, with all these issues, afraid to ask for help, there came a time where I just got out of control.
Mhm.
And February 23rd, 2012, um, I was at a house party. Me and a friend of mine Ryan had got into an argument. We were growing lots of pot. We were doing lots of illegal things. Like I was living a criminal lifestyle, and uh, everything just went bad. Me and Ryan got in a fight. I ended up picking up a knife on the coffee table and taking his life. Um, in that moment, everything changed.
Mm.
Like the world changed. The world stopped. Um, and I ultimately committed the most selfish act a human could commit. Um, and so, I didn't know what the future looked like, right? I really, I do remember a couple of days after that, I was immediately arrested. But a couple of days after that, I was sent in a jail cell, and I just remembered that no matter what happens, I was fighting first degree murder. Life in prison is what, they wanted to give me. No matter what happens, I want to help people live their best life. I want to help people meet full potential and do it sober. Like, I don't want people
Mm.
to go down the road I went down. And uh, I had a lot of guilt, a lot of shame, and you know, fighting a life sentence. I definitely deserved a life sentence. By the grace of God, I'm here today. So, that shows you, the redemption and the grace and the mercy that God gives us. Um, but I remember a couple months in, uh, like, all the guilt and all the shame was so heavy. I was talking to my mom on the phone, and just like, I had all these, every negative thought you could think of, suicide, um, just, that's ultimately the worst thought like we could have
Mhm.
on ourselves. Like, I really didn't want to live with myself no more, but I was
Mm.
too coward uh, to actually do anything about it. But I was talking to my mom on the payphone in jail, and expressing this to her, like, I don't know what to do. And she's like, honey, you need to pick up the Bible. And so I remember getting off the phone with her and grabbing a Bible off the book cart on my way back to my cell. And not immediately, but later that evening, like, I opened it up,
Mm.
and just like that, like, I felt the presence, I felt the comfort. And we all know that, right? Like, that was Jesus, that was the Holy Spirit coming in my cell. It speaks about it all through Scripture, right? Like, Jesus visited me in that jail cell. um and so I held on to that. Now, I did not give my life to God. I did not uh I didn't, yeah, I didn't give my life to God. I didn't experience His forgiveness, or any of that yet.
Mhm.
But I held on to that Bible. And so from that day forward, my Bible study, my devotional was like routine. Like, I do not want to go without this feeling. Um, Fast forward a couple years fighting my case, I was given 11 years for voluntary manslaughter. And so then I hit the California prison system. And if anyone knows anything about prison in California, like, it's very racially segregated, survival of the fittest, maximum security yards. People are getting stabbed and killed every day. Not
Mhm.
killed every day, but like, there's just lots of violence. And so when you step onto a maximum security prison yard, like, you put on your big boy face,
Mhm.
and like, you don't uh, talk about Jesus. You don't
Mhm.
talk about like love and hope
Mhm.
and all these things. No. And so I like to say, like, I was a cowardly Christian, like, in the cell. Like, I was doing my Bible studies, I was doing everything, praying, and I was staying sober right from the day I took Ryan's life. Like, I was sober. Um, Fast forward 3.5 years, like, on maximum security prison yards, I finally arrived at San Quentin. Now, San Quentin is like one of a kind prison, right? We have over 300 self help programs there, 100 self help programs, 3,000 volunteers going in annually to work with the men there. And I wanted to go there for two reasons: college and baseball, right? They had a baseball program and a college program. However, when I got to San Quentin, um, I didn't know, like, how to act at a low level prison, right? Like, I had this false belief system, like this prison belief system, that we don't do certain things, and at San Quentin it was like the opposite.
Mhm.
With that, and my grandmother was given 6 months to live at the time, and I just had all this stuff going on. And once again, like, I didn't give my life to Jesus yet. Like, I was reading
Mhm.
the Bible, doing all my devotion, but I hadn't given my life to Jesus. I hadn't experienced that forgiveness. So what? I'm still carrying shame, guilt, and I relapsed. In prison, you can get anything you want. It's almost easier uh, to get drugs and alcohol in prison than it is on the streets. And so I relapsed, and within a week, like, I was back in trouble. Like
Mm.
I had assaulted a officer there and was put in solitary confinement for um, almost a year. I would
Mm.
receive an additional 4 years. But while I was in solitary confinement, like I finally heard from God. I finally was
Mm.
quiet enough and everything was so still that I could hear his voice. And so May 21st, 2016, it was the day before my youngest brother's birthday, and uh, battles with autism. He has been diagnosed with autism, and so doctors, medication, no one's going to heal him. Like I know God can heal him, work a miracle through him, and so I'm praying for him. Like God heal him, please. Like heal Benny. And like I heard this voice that was so loud and so powerful, and it said, "What are you going to do for me?" Like it's just loud. It fills the cell.
Mm.
Like the guys next to me didn't hear it, obviously,
Mhm.
right? But like God was just yelling at me, like, "What are you gonna do for me?" And in that moment, I realized He needed me to give Him my addiction. Like I needed to
Mm.
give Him my life. Like my way isn't working. And so, a lot of rookie Christians, or cowardly Christians, as I used to call myself, um, like we're always asking, "God, help me!" Like I need
Mhm.
help, help me, help me. But it's like, what are we gonna do for Him? What are we gonna sacrifice for Him? And so He was just telling me, like, dude, give me your addiction. Like,
Mm.
give me your life and I'm going to use you. Like, you're powerful. Like, you didn't go through all this pain and all this trauma to like not use it, but like, you need
Mhm.
to allow me to use it. And so, you know what? Ultimately, I got on my knees and I promised to never use alcohol or drugs again. And there hasn't been an urge since that day,
Mm.
May 21st, 2016, delivered. Like AA, NA, all that stuff. Like, they're great programs, but Jesus delivered me.
That's
Um,
amazing.
And so the beautiful thing about that is like I was still facing all kinds of extra time. I should have been shipped out of San Quentin, but God somehow paved a way and opened up so many doors to allow me to stay at San Quentin. And you know, the rest is history. Like
Mm.
the things I was able to do inside prison, like only God can explain.
Mhm. Yeah.
Like you got to look up and like, wow, like this was a God thing.
Mm.
And so that's how I got to San Quentin, and that was a little bit about my uh, coming to Jesus.
I love that story. I hadn't heard you share that before, so that was great. And I remember when I was on my way, I knew I was going to be going to San Quentin that month. I would tell people, and they'd be like, "What? Like a prison? Like you're going to go in?" I'm like, "Yeah." Like I wasn't afraid or scared or anything. But what I thought San Quentin was going to be like, and what I experienced was completely different. I'm not familiar with the California prison system. I'm not familiar with any prison system. I'm not familiar with how unique San Quentin is by any means. But I remember we walked in and we had a tour by some men who were amazing, and we came in, we turned around that corner, they showed us where the old solitary confinement building was. You know what I'm talking
The
about.
dungeon.
They told us about the dungeon. We saw the dungeon, and then we came down further the walkway, and I was like, where am I? Because I hardly saw a guard. I'm sure they were out there. I hardly saw a guard, and I saw men playing baseball. I saw men running on the track. I saw men hanging out. We were on a tour. Like there was no guard with me. There was no guard with us, you know? And I was very, very surprised. And I want to thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your story, but I want to talk a little bit because I think a lot of people who are unfamiliar with prison life, or we always see as TVs and movies, and you admittedly said, and I know that it's true, that San Quentin is unique and it is different. But what San Quentin is doing that is so valuable is they're working towards rehabilitation of incarcerated people. And a lot of people, Branden, would say Branden doesn't deserve to be out. Branden took the life of somebody. What do you mean? What do you mean rehabilitation? Like, how could somebody do this? And I just think that nobody is too far gone, you know? And I think that as a society, that rehabilitation matters. Not only if I believe rehabilitation matters if you spend your entire life in prison or if you actually get out of prison. Like rehabilitation matters. So I want to hear from you. Talk to me just a little bit about um, the value that you see in rehabilitation within our prison systems.
I think no, I think you're absolutely right. One, like I didn't deserve anything um, other than a life sentence, right? However, um, like redemption is possible, change is possible. I don't think there's bad people. I think there's good people that make bad choices. Um, and so, for so many reasons, like it is important to invest into the incarcerated population, right? There's almost 3 million people incarcerated in the United States.
Jeez.
92% of those people will return home,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like 92% of 3 million people will be coming back. Like today's prisoner is tomorrow's neighbor. So, like, what type of
Mm-hmm.
neighbor do you want coming home? This is the numbers that like people need to like understand. Like 85% of that 92% who come home return to prison within 3 years.
Mm.
Like our recidivism rate is 85%. And like that means there's more harm going on. Like when people come home, like they're not being healed, they're not being restored, for many different reasons. San Quentin, our recidivism rate is not that high. I think it's, maybe 63, 65%, right? Which is still too high. But like we need to invest in the people. Like these are people. Yeah, they made bad choices. They need to be held accountable. I needed to be held accountable for my choices. But based on the law, like I also believe God's grace. Like I was given a second chance. Like, um, and so I was blessed to go to San Quentin where there's all these opportunities, and I took advantage of them. But you know, it's just one of those things. I think like within the church, like Christians, like people who like look in the mirror and is like, yes, I'm a Christian. Like them are some of the most judgiest people from my experience, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you sit here and read your word, right? And like you're listening and you're getting fueled up by like murderers, people who were once labeled as murderers,
Mm-hmm.
right? But yet you look at me like in the flesh and it's like, oh, it's a whole different story,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like my choices don't define who I am. Like Jesus and God defines who I am today, and one sin isn't greater than the other. However, like people in our society, like we definitely put a hierarchy on sin,
Mm-hmm.
which is wrong. I get it, but uh, I just think that we need to invest more into the men and women who are behind bars because they are coming home. And
Mm-hmm.
for many different reasons, like California, it's $112,000 a year to house someone in prison. Like that's a lot of money.
It's a
Like
lot
you
of
put a
money.
$100,000 in someone's like rehabilitation and healing and
Right.
like mental health and addiction recovery, like
You're getting a whole nother person.
you're getting a whole nother person.
Yeah.
And so I think like we just need to be willing to look at people as humans and
Yeah.
not put labels on them as like inmates or prisoners or the trash.
Mm. Did you get your college degree at San Quentin?
So I didn't finish my college degree like the baseball field. I spent more
Uh-huh.
time like balance, right? I'm
Yeah.
trying to work on balance in my life, and like the balance was like lots of baseball, little of college.
Yeah.
However, you know what? Like I was always someone who believed in focused education. Like I didn't feel like I needed a college degree to do the things I wanted. And me and Lacey had conversations like doing college, like you get extra time taken off your sentence. So the more credits I got in college, the more time, the faster I'd come home.
Mm-hmm.
But there were some things that I was really passionate about, some
Mm-hmm.
programs I helped develop at San Quentin that really focused on people and providing opportunities to people that I would rather like my heart was there
Mm-hmm.
and not necessarily in the college. And like we had some uncomfortable conversations. Lacey got frustrated with me on a couple of occasions. Like, why aren't you doing college? Like, screw everything
Mm-hmm.
else.
Yeah.
But like for me, like I was like, just keep the faith. Like God's gonna take care of like the numbers. Like when I'm coming home, and sure enough, like I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't supposed to come home till 2026.
Yeah.
Here I am.
Wow. You talk about how you were wanting to invest in some programs there, and I would love for you to tell us about some of the programs that you were able to start and be a part of there.
Yeah, no. once again, like God's the only like answer, like how some of the stuff that we were able to do inside that prison happened. One of them, me and Bob, and a friend of ours, Kevin, started, the Dream Big program, the Love Does program inside San Quentin, which is, amazing. Uh, um, I started a program with a friend of mine, Ted, called Coaching for Life, where we really brought. I had about 10 incarcerated men who had athletic background. One of them's a former Pro Bowl NFL player, and I coached them up, really got them understanding who they were as men, and how sports played good, had a positive and a negative effect on them, specifically the coaches. And then I would bring youth coaches in and sit down with these guys, and they got to share their experiences with the coaches on like what worked, what didn't. So I think like that was a fun program that I had that we did, but the funnest one, and the one that's like really having an impact today is For This Productions, the only incarcerated film crew in the country. And me and a few other guys, we had all this camera equipment down in the media center, which San Quentin is the only prison that has, podcasts, newspapers, and film, videos coming out that's fully ran by the incarcerated. But uh, we started For This, like we just wanted to like use the tools that we had, which were cameras and audio equipment, and humanize the incarcerated, like tell impactful stories that humanize the incarcerated. And so today, like when I came home, I was given a job with the nonprofit that supports and oversees those media programs, and I get to take that program into other prisons, which is really fun. Um, and just being able to tell stories, I think that's what we're doing here today,
Mm-hmm.
is like just share stories. And so uh, we were blessed with the platforms like the Department of Corrections, like once again, a God thing. Like they said, yeah, you could have an Instagram and a YouTube and like a website. Like, and you could, obviously they like look over and make sure we're not
Yeah.
saying or talking about things that, don't align with the mission. But like no one's doing that in the country.
Yeah. I know. I'm
Um,
going to put all the links in the show notes, guys, because you need to follow all of this just so you can know. Tell about how the rate of people who are coming out of that program re-entering prison. What is the rate for you guys in that specific program?
so since 2012, we've graduated and paroled nearly 500 people. None of them come back. We have a 0% recidivism rate. And not only are the participants who are going home like doing good and not coming back, like they're thriving.
Mm.
Like they're executive directors of nonprofits, they're leaders in the community. They're doing their own documentaries. Like, they're doing amazing things and having a huge impact. And recently, the governor went into San Quentin and did a news conference about kind of giving San Quentin a facelift and really investing more into San Quentin. And his uh, like the program that he talked about and highlighted the most on kind of like what steered this new investment was our program, like our media programs.
It was amazing. I mean, I went in and Brandon, you were like, "Don't tell us it's amazing if it's not," but I'm telling you, it's amazing. Like I went in and I saw the newspaper. There's a newscast. They were creating videos. I've been following you guys on Instagram now, and it really is not just like pity telling you that it's amazing. Like, oh, look at our incarcerated people. Let's give them a clap. It is literally really, really good and so well done. And I say all the time, stories change the world. It's one of the reasons I love the happy hour. I love telling people stories. Not only do stories change the world, Brandon, stories create empathy in people's lives. And for me personally, knowing you, it changes the way I will ever think about an incarcerated person. And that happens in all areas of our life. If you don't know anyone who is Muslim, it's hard for you to think about Muslim people. If you don't know anyone who was born in Puerto Rico, you know what I mean? It's just like, and obviously we can't have touch points for every single different person in the world. But when we hear people's stories and we see their lives, it changes the way that we think about that quote unquote population. And so I'm such a big fan of people getting to know people who are different than them. And so I'm grateful for our communication and that you get to come on the happy hour and share your story. Um, and congrats on all the work that you did in San Quentin, creating beautiful things. I want to go back to baseball in a little bit, but I want to stick here for a minute because I know people are kind of wondering, what does it look like for a follower of Jesus to have restoration and rehabilitation, also for like the things that put them in prison. So what does that look like for you? Um, Obviously knowing full well, like I'm not identified by my sin, I'm not identified by my actions, but also how do you walk through a state of repentance for that, either within yourself, between the Lord, with your victim's family? What does that look like?
Yeah. I think that's the hardest part, right? Like we all sin, some greater than others. Um, but like for me, what I've realized is forgiveness. Um, like forgiveness is a release,
Mhm.
right? Like, you know, I wasn't able to actually like, blossom and experience redemption and restoration until like I knew Jesus good enough that like he forgave me for, my horrible choices.
Mhm.
Um, but then, so that's the forgiveness for self, right? Um, but in that, like, I realized that I might never be forgiven. Like Ryan's family may never forgive me. I don't need their forgiveness though, right?
Mhm.
Like I got God's forgiveness. Like the
Mhm.
word says it, right? Like countless times.
Mhm.
Um, but I think it's important for survivors and victims to forgive their offenders, not for the offenders, but for them,
Mhm.
right? Like when you forgive someone for an action that they've, for something they've done to you, like that forgiveness, like authentic forgiveness means like you're not allowing that to define who you are no more. You're not going to let
Mhm.
it have a hold
Mhm.
on your life. Um, and so like I think forgiveness is something that like as a society like we need to do better job at,
Mhm.
right? As Christians we
Mhm.
need to do better job at, like, you know um but then like the repentance, like for me, like I knew I committed the ultimate selfish act, like the ultimate sin. I did it, and so that's why I wake up every morning trying to just be better for myself, um, for my family, for my community, for everyone around me, and just like serve in any way I can. Like I'll never be able to bring Ryan back. I'll never be able to make up for my mistakes, but I'm gonna try every single day I'm alive.
Mhm.
And I think I think that's all we could do is one, seek forgiveness through God, and two, like just live a life of remorse. Like I
Mhm.
feel like remorse for me, like true remorse is lived out in actions. It's not words. It's not a vocabulary of
Mhm.
words put together. I'm sorry, I apologize. No,
Mhm.
it's your actions.
Mhm. But are you at the point where you aren't doing those actions so that God will forgive you? Like you feel like I don't need to prove myself to God.
No,
Right.
no. God's forgiven me.
Which would be
Like I've already,
unhealthy. Yeah.
yeah, like I'm not in a like a competition or like I
Mhm.
have to prove myself to God.
Yeah.
Like I need to ask for forgiveness every day when I sin and fall short. Like I'm never
Mhm.
gonna be like, you
Mhm.
know, yeah, I'm never gonna live a perfect day.
Mhm.
But like I don't need to prove myself to God. God knows who I am. Like He knows
Mhm.
my heart. Like once
Mhm.
again, like there's no bad people, right? Like there's just bad choices.
Mhm.
And so like if we unpack all the traumas and all the pains and all that we've went through as humans, and we've all experienced it, every
Mhm.
single person listening right now has experienced their own traumas and pain.
Mhm.
And I'm sure there's things that are sitting on their heart right now that they got to move away.
Mhm.
Um, but once we do that, like we don't have to prove ourselves. God knows what's there.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, yeah.
When we talked a couple weeks ago, me and you and Lacey, about these conversations, I told you something that felt pretty vulnerable for me to say to you, but I'm going to say it now to the entire world because I think it is like a lot of people would resonate with what I'm saying. And I told you that my husband Aaron and I were having a conversation about something that we had watched on TV, and this person on TV had committed a murder, and I said out loud to my husband, this was just a couple weeks ago. I said out loud to him, I said, "Gosh, I don't know how anyone could actually do that." And as soon as it came out of my mouth, I knew that it was wrong that I said that. I knew that it wasn't true, and I remembered meeting you guys at San Quentin, and I immediately, I mean, seconds, all that happened in seconds where I had those like thoughts come to me. And I immediately recalled my statement and said to him, I was like, actually, like any of us could, like I could. And it was this moment of me kind of acknowledging that it's just this like 3 steps away from making, a bad decision or having a bad night or letting that trauma overtake me or whatever. And I told you that on the phone call, and I felt bad saying it. Like I was kind of embarrassed when I said it, but I think a lot of people would feel that way. And so what is your kind of conversation back to me, or that idea of like, oh, I would never do that. I could never do what Branden. I could never, these people who are incarcerated, like never me. What is your response to that?
I mean, I like to say never, right?
Well,
But
in full
that's,
disclosure, I told you that like I recall that, and I'm like,
yeah.
I don't want to feel that way, but I'm admitting to you that that was my first thought.
Yeah. And I think like that's natural, right? Like it's natural to, like, when you see murder, when you see destruction, right, that is caused by other humans. And like, yeah, we sin, like everybody sins, but like normal people, quote unquote, like that's not what they do. So like when you see it, say, I would never do that. How can someone do that? Like that's natural, that's human. But when we really have got it, like, and not that you didn't, right? Like that,
Mhm.
just because we have Jesus and we have God like completely in our hearts and in our lives, like sometimes like we'll say something just like subconsciously, and
Mhm.
we're not even aware of what we're saying. Like that's
Mhm.
just natural. It's, um, but I think once again, like we just have to look back at like why,
Mhm.
what happened, why did these people do these things,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And like you have to be able to ask those questions with empathy.
Mhm.
Doesn't mean we're excusing. Like
Mhm.
I'm not asking anybody to excuse me for my actions. Even forgive me,
Mhm.
right? Like hold me accountable, but like have the empathy and compassion to like, why did this happen?
Mhm.
Why did Branden make those choices?
Mhm.
Um, and I think that's kind of like once we could lean into that and like just always be in that empathetic and understanding place, um, like we'll be able to move forward. And once again, like it's in the church,
Mhm.
like some of the most judgmental people,
Mhm.
identify as Christians.
Yeah.
And like I think there was a reporter who did a journalist who did an interview with the Dalai Lama, and he says, why is it that you have an issue with Christians? He says, I don't have an issue with Christians. If Christians were more like Jesus, we would identify as Christians.
Mm.
And so I think like that always just relates with me.
Yeah. It
Um,
it makes me think on like a whole different topic, but I was at a conference in January about it was a pro-life conference, and so it was about sanctity of life, which I said from the beginning. I think scans it's a lot of things other than abortion, and so even saying that I'm pro-life, a lot of people would think like, oh, then you're just anti-abortion, which I am anti-abortion, but I'm also pro-life in lots of I'm against the death penalty. I'm pro like women getting support. I'm all of a lot of things, but a lot of conversations around abortion would come back to a lot of people would just say like, oh, I could never, I can't believe that woman, or who would do that, when really what we're lacking is like what were the circumstances in this woman's life that made her think this was her only option. Again, different than like than your story in particular, but it is the same concept that you're saying, is like, how do we have empathy for people who are in a different situation from us? How do we have empathy for people who we would look at and other them and say I would never? Because really what I was saying in that statement, and I can say it. It's me. I'm talking about myself. What I was really saying in that statement was, I'm better than quote unquote them. And that's where I think it is a hard place for us. So I'm grateful that God immediately was like, hey, hold up, Miss Thing. Like, you better
Mm-hmm.
watch yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so I hope even me saying that can allow other people to be like, where in my life do I feel better than quote unquote them? And ask God to really point that out to you the same way he did for me.
Yeah. You know what? I literally had to be put in a 6 by 9 cell for over a decade to be humbled
Mm,
because I thought like I had an ego. I had lots
mm-hmm,
of pride. I was better than you.
mm-hmm,
And all these different things. And I just had to be humbled in every way. And
mm,
I still have to be humbled.
mm-hmm,
Um, like God's still working in me, and I think like He's always going to work in me
mm-hmm,
until I'm up there in heaven with Him. But like it's just humility.
mm-hmm.
Like no one's better than the next
Yeah.
person.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Man, just asking God like to point that out in our individual lives of where that pride comes up and we don't even realize it. Like in the example I just gave of my own self. How long were you in San Quentin?
so I was at San Quentin for almost 6 years. I spent almost 11 years in prison.
Okay. You said you spent a year in solitary confinement.
Yep.
I can only use my imagination about that, but can you give us a little bit of like understanding of what that means?
Um, in your cell 24 hours a day. Like they say, like, oh, you get 1 yard of rec a day, but no, that's not how it works. You get 8 hours, 10 hours of yard a week, 8 hours a yard a week. So every other day, they'll take you out to yard for a couple hours. But when you go to yard, you're in a dog kennel. Like think of an oversized dog
Mm-hmm.
cage, dog kennel. That's what it is. And yeah, just like isolated. Everywhere you go, you're in shackles and handcuffs and escorted in your boxers and sandals. Got to strip out every time you leave the cell. So very, very humiliating, humbling. Um, all that stuff that you see in movies, like that's how it is.
And that was
But
at San Quentin, right?
so San Quentin is the only prison in California that has death row. So not only was I in solitary confinement, but I was in the adjustment center because my past reputation in prison before Jesus, uh, and then my actions that sent me to
Mm-hmm.
solitary confinement. They put me in the adjustment center, which is the hold for death row. So the most secure housing unit in the state of California. Everybody that I was locked in, they were all on death row. Like there were serial killers. You know, there was a lot of bad choices
Mm-hmm.
in that area. But once again, like there's also opportunity. Like for me, there was opportunity. Like everything stopped. Like I didn't have nothing to do other than reflect. So it was like a year long. I look at it as like a year long of reflection
Mm,
and uh, like being able to get real with God.
mm. In solitary confinement that year, is that when you became a follower of Jesus?
That's when I get, yeah, that's
Yeah.
when ultimately
Yeah.
like everything happened.
In May.
And once again, like I said, like I picked up that Bible, in 2012 when I was battling, suicidal thoughts
Mm-hmm.
and just all this shame. And I felt that comfort, but didn't, I didn't accept Jesus into my
Mm-hmm.
life. I didn't
Yeah.
give him control of my life.
Would you say, and I think my question is just curious of like behind bars, you said, at the other prison you were a cowardly Christian and it was not really a safe thing to be talking about the love and joy and peace of Jesus. And then you spent, that year in solitary confinement and really had a lot of time to reflect and started following Jesus. Would you say that coming out of solitary confinement, going back into the regular population, was it a noticeable change in your life for people that knew you before that you had changed?
Yeah. I think the one thing people always knew that like I was respectful, like you could trust me, those types of things. But it's different. Like all that stuff's good, but it's different when like you have God, like,
Mhm.
and you have like the spirit within you, the spirit around you.
Mhm.
Um, and so people were cautiously, uh,
Mhm.
they were cautious, right? But I think like within no time, like everybody's like, wow, like yeah, God, something happened.
When you say cautious, would that be because I've heard a lot of people say, well, of course people became a Christian in prison. Like, you know, what do they have to lose? Would you say caution because of that or caution just because of like, is this real? What's going on?
I think cautious just uh I don't think cautious like cautious in a bad way, right?
Mhm.
They were like I was wild and like I
Mhm.
was like I had something to prove. And so like in prison once again like it's like if you're always on the offense, like you're never going to become a victim.
Mhm.
And so like I was always fighting, like I didn't like I built a reputation of being that tough guy, being that
Mhm.
guy that like and like I used to justify it, like oh
Yeah, take
like
care of myself.
like the bullies, like all the people that like use like the political structure, like manipulated it,
Mhm.
like that's what I would battle. So like I always used to like, oh like I'm doing a good thing here, but like so when I came out of solitary, like people were just cautious, like
Mhm.
you know, let's you know let's give Brandon his space, and you know what I mean, like you know, but in a matter of no time, people were like, you know what, like he's really doing a lot of good things, and I think I led a lot of people who were like not necessarily led people to Christ, but just led people to like investing in themselves and
Mhm.
taking full advantage of the opportunities,
Yeah.
and just to like be fully transparent. I wasn't like I was open about my faith and I was open about like what God's doing in my life and me getting delivered. But I never wanted to be that person that was like a hypocrite. When it comes to the word, I never wanted to preach and I still won't ever preach if I'm doing something in my life that people could like use
Mhm.
against me. Cause like
Mhm.
I take it serious. And
Mhm.
I've always like people in the church who preach, you know, preach this, but live this. Like
Mhm.
that's what kept me away from wanting to identify as a Christian.
Mhm.
And so like there were still things that I fell short of that I was still working through that held me back from like being so public about
Mhm.
um, really just preaching. You
Yeah,
know,
especially because of your experience in middle school with the principal. I mean,
absolutely,
that'll jack somebody up, you know, with speaking something and then acting another one. Brandon, I want to ask you this. In a minute, I want you to tell us like what you're doing now and how we can be a part and follow and support and all those things. But I want you to take us back to the day you stepped out of San Quentin as a free man. And can you tell me about that day?
yeah. I think a dream come true, right? It was uh, overwhelming in the sense like when I stepped off the van, like they put you in a van, drive you out of the prison, and drop you off to your family or whoever's there. I had quite a bit of people out there, and I was just overwhelmed with like joy, happiness, sadness. There was this sadness because like I've let these people down for so long, and like just like this weight of like now I gotta like now it's real. Now I have to
Mhm.
like redeem myself and go on this long journey of redemption. But like just holding my kids, my wife, like my family, my parents, like the best feeling ever. And then the whole since coming home, like there's been some ups and downs, um, but like every day is a dream come true. Like I wake
Mhm.
up, like I've always been like optimistic and like like high energy. Um, but like I sit back and I'm always doing things like wow, like I'd sat back in a prison cell for a decade dreaming about this stuff,
Yeah.
and so it's true, and like just lots of grateful moments.
Did you experience any complicated emotions that might be like sorrow for leaving your buddies or sorrow for what you were having to let go? Like it feels like, of course not, you're ready to go home, but I would imagine there's some really deep bonds created. Um, in prison. And so was there any kind of complicated emotions that you might have felt as well?
I don't think the day I left. I think a few weeks after I paroled, I went back in to San Quentin. I do some work with the San Francisco Giants, and so I took the mental health team from the Giants into the prison to talk to the incarcerated baseball team. Um, and like it was like 4 weeks, 4 weeks after, and like it was so good to like give them a hug, especially Chase, my old cellmate who we lived together for almost 5 years. Um, like it just felt good. I felt so comfortable. My therapist, she was, she's a therapist for the Giants, Shayna, and she was sitting there and she's like, "We're doing therapy, right?" Like, and she's speaking and she keeps like like checking me out, like seeing what I'm doing. And she
Yeah.
afterwards, she's like, "You felt so comfortable in there. Like
Mm,
I hadn't seen you that comfortable anytime I've met you on the outside." And I'm like,
mm,
that was my home for almost 11 years.
yeah.
But when I left and I had to say goodbye to those guys and walk out of that gate and not be able to take them and like not know
Mm,
when I'll be able to see them again, that was very hard. Like I
mhm,
finally was able to have this empathy and understanding of what my wife and what my family, every person who visits their loved ones and has to leave, like
mhm.
I finally experienced what those feelings were.
Yeah.
And I remember driving home in the truck after that visit, and it like I got sad.
Mhm,
Like, I don't know, like, I have some of my closest bonds,
mhm.
my closest brothers are doing life in prison,
Yeah.
and so I don't know when they're gonna come home, if they'll ever come home,
Yeah.
and so just staying with that and, like,
Mm,
knowing I have this life out here. But then the other part of it too is, like, it comes up from time to time, but, like, here I'm living this life, I'm with my wife, I'm with my kids, I get to do a lot of amazing things, um, and Ryan doesn't have that no more.
mhm,
Ryan's not here. Ryan's kids don't have that. Ryan's family don't have Ryan. And so, like, once again, like, always just trying to remain humble and
mm,
super grateful
mhm.
and take advantage of every moment.
I can see that humility, coming out when you talk about what you have and always kind of remembering what Ryan doesn't have, and it doesn't seem as though you're, like, beating yourself up. It really just seems as you're, like, just a sobering reality, this is the truth of what it is. Um, I wanna talk about baseball for a second. You, admittedly told us that you were a star baseball player, and I love that so much, but, you have done work with the San Francisco Giants, you said. San Quentin, explain that San Quentin has a baseball team, like, what's going on here, and tell me a little bit about what you do with them.
Yeah, so San Quentin's the only baseball or only prison in the country, possibly the world, that has an incarcerated baseball team that plays civilian teams. So pre-COVID, 2019, we had 420 something people come in from the outside. These are all different teams, right? Come in to play our prison team.
When you say teams, is it like the high school team, a college team, a pro team, minor league? What is it?
Everything. So we have
Okay.
a lot of them are just like, competitive men's rec teams.
Mhm.
We had a couple high school, like seniors, 18-year-old teams come
Uh-huh.
in, super powerful. We've had some like traveling, like really competitive teams come in. We've had father-son teams come in. We've had independent professional teams come in, and then we've had a handful of teams like of college and retired pro players come
Mhm.
in in 2019. So baseball has been being played inside San Quentin since like the 30s, and for many years they were actually in uh, the minor league division. So the
Wow.
independent pro, the minor, like the farm leagues in northern central to northern California, they were in that division. Every game was a home game,
Yeah.
but back then, if you weren't a lifer, like the guards would take you out for the All Star game. They would literally take you out to Sacramento and like you got to play if you
Wow.
were not a lifer and you made that
Yeah.
team. So like San Quentin has a rich history of baseball. And in 2019, we set the record. We went 38-2. We had a 33 game winning streak. Like, and that was like, talk about like just a special like
Mhm.
time, right? Like I was in prison, but like every time I put on that uniform, like I gotta get out of prison blues, the
Yeah.
prison scrubs, and put on a baseball uniform and feel human.
Mhm.
Um, and so, amazing program. And over the last couple of years, me and Lacey were able to build a relationship with a friend of ours, Bobby, at the San Francisco Giants. And, he started donating and doing different things for the program. And since coming home, like me and Bobby are like, we need to do more. Like we need to do more. And so we're working right now on having a public partnership between the San Francisco Giants and the San Quentin Baseball program, um, and really just like influence the community and show the
Mhm.
community that like people invest into prison rehabilitation and
Mhm.
programs.
I love it so much. Could you have fans come in and watch, or was it just other inmates?
So no, so like family members, like there
Uh-huh.
was lots of times like family members of like the other team
Uh-huh.
would come in, like we could get people cleared. Not our family members. Lacey used to
I was
hate
gonna
it.
say,
She's
did
like,
Lacey ever get to see you play?
no, she's gonna see me play in there. I'm gonna take her in. Like when I go back in and play, I'm gonna take a
Uh-huh.
team in there this summer, and she's gonna go in
Oh, that's great.
and watch. But yeah, I think for once again, it's the hope, right? Like
Mhm.
civilians, people who aren't in prison, when they go in and spend time with people who are serving time, like your beacons of hope. Like you get to go
Mm.
love on people who haven't been loved, and that's
Mm.
one of the things. Like just back to Lacey, like she, like I have a wife who like seen the good of me and was
Mm.
really willing to able to like love on love on me despite of my choices.
Mhm. We're gonna talk to Lacey on Friday, and she's gonna tell us the story of you guys getting together and meeting and marriage and kids and all the things. I'll let her fill in all the blanks for everybody
Yeah.
with all of that. I think it's a beautiful story. Okay, tell us, Brandon, how can people follow what you're doing? How can people be a part of what you're doing? What's going on right now with what you're doing?
Yeah, so today, like I said, like I was able to start with some friends inside for this productions. We're a program underneath the Pollen Initiative, um, and so that's what I'm doing today. Like taking incarcerated-led media programs with my partner Jesse, and like we're taking them into other prisons and allowing other incarcerated populations to have their own newspapers, have their own podcasts, have their own film programs, really just investing. Like ultimately, like at Pollen Initiative, we're just investing in people who've been
Mm-hmm.
overlooked, who've made choices, and then um, doing whenever I meet someone that I feel like I could love on and really like mentor. I do some coaching,
Mm-hmm.
but just really trying to provide opportunities to the incarcerated. You could see us at For This Productions, which is the incarcerated ran video program, San Quentin News, and then our organization that oversees all of those programs is the Pollen Initiative. And then me, you can follow me at Branden Terrell Coaching.
I love it so much, and I'm going to put all of those links in the show notes for you guys can find them, and I'll also share them on Instagram and stuff. Brandon, I think one of the things I have gained the most from this conversation, and really my hope for even having this conversation, besides even sharing your amazing story and what God done in your life, obviously, but one of my hopes is just, you've said it already, is just treating people like humans. And I think that we have an incarceration system in our country that oftentimes does not treat inmates in a humane manner. And you've said it. Obviously, I believe it. Justice needs to happen. People are held accountable for what they do. But as a follower of Jesus, I'm really compelled to see how do we treat people in humane ways, whether that is incarcerated, whether it is immigration policies, whether it is women in unwed pregnancies, whether it is a Muslim, whatever it is. I really believe that people deserve to be treated as human. And so thank you. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Thank you for sharing your story. And Lacey's going to be on Friday.
I know, I can't wait. She has the powerful story.
I'm excited. I'm really excited to talk to her. Branden, thank you so much.
Thank you.